Alrighty, g'day everybody, it's the Doga! And it's now time for the next installment of the AC/DC album collection. We finally arrived at 1990's The Razor's Edge. Doesn't seem like 32 years ago, but it is. So, I don't have a great deal of copies of this album, and pretty soon, once I get to some of the later albums, I'll be featuring 2 albums at a time, because I have less and less copies of a good portion of them. But either way, it's time for The Razor's Edge. Let's start with the original Australian LP. This was the last album released on LP here in Australia before vinyl production effectively came to an end in 1991 or so. Haven't found very many copies of this in stores, maybe about 2. And I just bought this one copy. Just put it down here. It's time to show off the last of the Australian vinyls from that era. Of course, you may have seen this already if you are a regular viewer to the channel. Distinctive red label, or orangey red, and pressed by CBS Records at the time, having replaced EMI after they closed their plant at the end of the 80s. I don't have any international copies of the album on vinyl, but the only other vinyl copy I have is the 2003 version. I'm sure you've seen this a few times, although it's the first time I'm showing it off, so here's the 2003 version with this rather generic and rather odd-looking label. Don't know why they didn't just go for like a replica of the Atlantic or Atco label. Why did they just have to give us this generic label with just the band logo? Far too generic looking for my liking. Okay, I have a couple of singles from the album. Officially, let's start off with the 7-inch single. This is Thunderstruck. This is the Australian 7-inch single. Bit plain looking compared to the one used in America. In fact, the image used for the American single was later used for the Australian version of Are You Ready? But I don't have the Australian version of that, unfortunately. Anyway, this is in need of a clean, but here it is. Side 1. And of course, on the opposite side was Fire Your Guns. Of course, this was the first album to have all the songs written entirely by Malcolm and Angus only. Brian no longer contributed to any lyrics beyond Blow Up the Video, which is a shame though. Anyway, the other single I have is a 12-inch. This is, I believe, a UK version of Are You Ready? This one's a gatefold, so let's just open it out. From what I can tell, this was put out just before the Donington performance, so I'm thinking somewhere between early and mid 1991. Interesting pictures of the band here. I think a good portion of these pictures are from the Blow Up Video era. That's probably why there's only just that one picture of Chris Slade down the bottom. Of course, this was the only album to feature Chris Slade on drums in the studio. He also is the drummer on AC/DC Live, which will be the next video in this series. So anyway, here is the 12-inch itself. Are You Ready? On side 1. And side 2 is, of course, Got You By the Balls and the title track, The Razor's Edge. Alright, those are the record-related items. Now it's time for cassettes. I only have 4 copies of the album on cassette, unfortunately. My dad's original copy of the album, unfortunately, got destroyed many years ago. So I present a replacement Australian copy. Took me a while to find one of these, actually, to replace my dad's old copy. iPad doesn't want to focus today. Never mind. Anyway, inside the J card here is the information on the album. Again, apologies for it being rather blurified for some strange reason. And we have the cassette here. Might just have to tighten up the slack. There we go. Side 1 here. And of course, side 2. Okay, I do have another copy of the Australian version. This particular copy I had didn't have a cover, so I had to get one made up for it. Just a photocopy of the original. But either way, 2 copies, so essentially it's the same. Again, apologies. This one might be in slightly better visual condition. But again, it's not focusing for some reason. Anyway, next up is a Canadian cassette of the album. I'm not 100% certain where in Canada this is from. It'll be interesting to know if Mark, from Mark's Music, Movies and More, has seen this particular cassette. This one's got a fairly simple design. The J card is actually shaped more like a J card, so it's a bit smaller. You'll notice the CBS logo is not present, instead it just has the albums only. And of course it was on Atco. And here is the Canadian cassette. Black shell with faded grey text. Up the top here, it says Made in Canada. It also has that on side 2 as well. So here's side 2, and again the text is a bit faded. There's a bit of a blotch there, I don't know what that is. Smeared ink, I guess. Either way, I think that's the only Canadian AC/DC album in any form that I have. So, now I've got a European copy that's pretty identical to the Australian and Canadian one in terms of having a transparent case like the Australian, but a different designed J card similar to the Canadian one. This European one is essentially the same J card design, so clear shell is also used here as well. As you can see, the text is all partially worn off again, which does get a bit irritating, but it's there. Okay, so that's the European cassette. And I also have, what is also was once my father's, is the Cassingle of Money Talks, featuring a rather unique image of Angus with that silly grin of his. Of course, the Australian Cassingle has Money Talks, Mistress for Christmas, and of course Down on the Borderline, which up until 2009 I believe was only released here. The US version of the single featured Borrowed Time, which I think was the B-side of That's the Way I Want to Rock and Roll. Anyway, sides 1 and 2 have the same content on them. Down on the Borderline was an outtake from Blow Up Your Videos, so it has Simon Wright on drums. Okay, I have only just 3 copies of the album on CD. So we'll start with this one here, the original 1990 Australian CD. And back cover here. Front insert is fairly similar to what was used for the cassette, so it's just fairly blank looking here. Just the basic information. Come on, back you go. Come on, get in there. And the disc itself. Doesn't want to focus. Okay. Okay, when the CD was reissued in 1995, essentially the same artwork was used for front and back, but this version from 1995 has the lyrics as printed here. You can see, uses the razor blade slash, or whatever it is, from the front cover. Oops. That's pretty much all that is for the 1995 CD, which uses the same mastering as the original. And of course the picture disc itself, a bit transparent, so it's a bit hard to see. You can almost see my head through there. Maybe one day I'll do a face reveal, but not now. Either way, the only other copy I have is the 2003 version, and this one's pretty beat up. Again, 2003 CDs. I got these when I was a teenager and wasn't the best looking after stuff. So that's basically it. Just the disc here, and of course the booklet. Okay, that is it. A bit shorter than it normally would be because I don't have many copies of the album, but you know what to do by now. Be sure to like or not. Leave a comment down below if you're in the mood to do so. And of course, if you're new to the channel, press the subscribe button. We're not that far off 150. But again, that's up to you. No pressure. But until next time, this is the Doga saying have a wonderful day and stay safe around the world, and we shall see you again.